Want to welcome everyone on in to the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It's brought to you by St. Luke's University Health Network. I can already see, Amy, I barely even said a word, and you got the littlest smirk on your face already. You've got a case of the Mondays today already.
I
lady.
do, but it's all good. We're going to be fine.
Okay,
We're good.
we have a lot of fun here. Well, I bring up Amy because we've also got some special guests. So Amy, our stellar, she's like the number 4 hitter in the lineup, always hitting grand slams. We've got a couple pinch hitters today. Jody out today, and we've got a couple of pinch hitters today. Ryan Schweiger and Erica Panella are both here today as we get ready to discuss Recovery Month. The month of September is Recovery Month. Two wonderful people to have join the conversation today because the conversation today is going to be about celebrating recovery. It certainly is a situation that individuals deal with, families deal with, significant people in our lives can deal with. And it's something that, I think when we are able to kind of cross that bridge into recovery is certainly something worth celebrating. So first and foremost, Amy, I'm going to come to you and ask you why these two today? Why are these two on the panel? Why are we talking to Ryan and Erica today?
So one of the things that we've done at St. Luke's is worked really hard to begin to incorporate folks that are certified in recovery specialties or peer specialties, people that have walked the walk and lived through the stuff and come out great on the other side. Folks that are inspirational to people that are trying to recover or maybe just getting into it. And Ryan and Erica are stars, and they are people with great stories and hopeful outcomes and stories of recovery. And I think it's important that people hear them.
All right. So, I guess the easiest place to start from here is to say hello to Ryan and Erica officially. Good morning to both of you. How we doing today?
It's Monday.
That was
get ready for rave reviews on the audio there. No, that's excellent. So I understand, every time we go into an episode, especially if we have a guest, the conversation's always, just what you guys are here for a reason. You're the experts. Everybody deep breath and relax. So Ryan, I'll actually start with you just for a little bit of your background, kind of the reason you're here today. And if you could just give us a little bit of something, we sure would appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me here. And so my name is Ryan Schweiger, and I work for St. Luke's Penn Foundation specifically. And I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is that I am in recovery from a substance use disorder, and I haven't used any substances and found a new way of life, I would call it. And I identify that date as being September 5th of 2008. So coming up this next week, actually next Monday, willing, I will be celebrating 14 years in recovery from a substance use disorder. And I'm also a certified recovery specialist. So a certified recovery specialist is an individual who identifies as being in recovery. There's some requirements around that in the state of Pennsylvania to identify as a person in recovery. But I have been a certified recovery specialist since 2013. So it's been around 9 years me being a certified recovery specialist. And prior to that, prior to being a certified recovery specialist, I also obtained a credential to be a certified peer specialist. So that's an individual who identifies as being in recovery for mental health. And I've been a certified peer specialist since 2011. So, with those two credentials, I've been sharing my lived experience openly to individuals who are on their own pathway to recovery for over 11 years. So it's been very rewarding, not only as a person in recovery personally, but also in the professional field, in the behavioral health field, to use my lived experience to connect with people and walk with them along their own journey of recovery.
That's excellent, man. Well, I wish you continued success, Ryan. Absolutely. And Erica, how about yourself?
Hello, Erica Panella. I work for St. Luke's Hospital in the emergency departments at Sacred Heart, Allentown, and inpatient floors of Bethlehem for individuals who are coming in with at their most vulnerable state of active addiction and substance use. And sorry, there it was. Take addiction out, because that just comes out sometimes. In December, I will be celebrating 14 years in recovery. And for me, that means that I act as an advocate for individuals who don't have a voice or don't know how to use their voice. At my very lowest point, before I found recovery, I was unable to speak and advocate for myself. So that's what I do now. And not only do I advocate for the patients that are coming into the hospitals, but I use my experience to educate and inform the providers and nurses and crisis workers that are in the hospital setting. So it's been really important to not only remain vigilant in the goal, but also passionate and share that passion so that they understand that recovery is not only possible, but it's probable. And they can have a part of it. I found that when I first started working in the emergency rooms, they don't know how to handle somebody who comes in with substance use disorder, or they see them on multiple occasions. They use their powerlessness in a way that stigmatizes the individuals who are coming in. So to sit down with them and have a very real conversation and allowing the providers and the nurses to listen to that conversation, it has started to change the culture of stigma and discrimination in the emergency rooms.
I couldn't help but notice, Amie, as she was kind of wrapping up that very well said statement there at the end, that you kind of started to get a little smile on your face. Can you kind of go into the impact that Ryan and Erica have kind of had on your day to day? Because one of the big reasons this is called Just Start the Conversation is because, to Erica's point, maybe there were some things that needed to change a little bit from her perspective. And it looks like things are starting to do just that, particularly in the emergency room. So can you kind of go into what you know about these two individuals a little bit? And beyond that, the idea of recovery and how these two, how Ryan and Erica kind of maybe impact your role in what you do when it comes to helping people find recovery?
Yeah, it's a really big deal to have Erica and Ryan and folks like them embedded in the culture of a health network. And I say that because, and this is certainly not just where we happen to be in our little corner of the world, but this is everywhere, where healthcare professionals and society in general still have this sort of stigma about folks that maybe are addicted to alcohol or drugs, and the recovery process or the ability to recover. And what we've done at St. Luke's by having experts with lived experience like Erica and Ryan, what we've done by having them be part of the circle is really having the folks on the front line doing the medical care start to get it, start to understand it, and start to kind of be like, okay, I can talk differently. I can speak differently to these people. I can use techniques, evidence-based techniques like motivational interviewing and all of the things that we use to help folks in recovery. And I can make a difference early on rather than treat the symptoms and then refer them out. We could make a much bigger difference. And we're seeing it. We're seeing people doctors, nurses, specialists make that referral to the certified peer specialists, certified recovery specialists, and make that phone call and make sure that people are hooked up in the right way before they leave their emergency department or their doctor's office or their specialist office. And it really is starting to become part of the culture, which, for myself, gosh, now I'm going to age myself, although I've done that before on this podcast, Crockett. When I first started out, I've been with St. Luke's 25 years now, but before that, when I was working in Northeast Philly in a drug and alcohol rehab in a men's heroin clinic, that's where I started my world in grad school. The culture was very different in terms of recovery and how we did recovery and how we taught recovery. And, it was, you go to AA, you don't do heroin, you're good to go. And that was 30 years ago. And it's much different today, and the supports are much different today. And my gosh, how I wish we had Ryan's and Erica's 30 years ago when I was in Northeast Philly with men in early recovery from heroin use and in and out and off the streets. And it certainly would have helped in terms of helping families reduce stigma and help give people more tools in their toolbox, really. But it's been fantastic. That's why it's been fantastic for the culture now for us.
I think it's so great to hear you say the words that you used were start to get it, because I think where stigmas lie is that you make your own assumptions, you don't know anything about it. And whether you are in a very professional circumstance, atmosphere, or you're not, that's kind of where those things start and can fester in a not so great way. But it's great to hear that you guys are kind of taking these steps at St. Luke's. I do want to come back to, and you can stop me, but I think maybe part of said stigma was the word addiction came up a little bit ago. And Erica, you did this move where you kind of put your hand, like, stop it, like put your hands over your face to kind of stop that. If I'm not overstepping with my question, why was that the reaction?
That word for so many people carries such a negative connotation to it. It feels very dirty, and for individuals who are coming in specifically, I've heard that being said to them, and I've seen them kind of recoil inside of themselves. And it's when I also hear addiction or addict, you're pointing a finger, you're blaming them, you're labeling them. So instead of doing that, treating them like a person that is suffering from something. Substance use disorder is a thing, and it's treatable, it's preventable, we can combat it with compassion, empathy, instead of blame and retaliation is how I feel. That's how I felt in the very beginning when I started in the emergency room in January. Like it was a battle, and we're finger pointing, and that's not what I'm seeing now. By treating it with that, being compassionate, we don't have to label.
Wow. I mean, you mentioned that it was January when you felt this way. To say in 8 months, how it's very clear on your face, Amie, I think would concur there as she's smiling and nodding that's quite a long way to come in an 8-month span. Ryan, I want to go to you here with this question. Again, credit to both of you for your effort in recovery. I'll start with you on this one, Ryan. Why this path? Perhaps let me rephrase that. You've recovered, and credit to you. Is there ever a fear that perhaps the environment, by kind of putting yourself back in an environment where there are people who were very much in a situation like you both found yourselves in, that maybe would make you hesitant to want to go in here and try to help others or be motivated to help others? What was it for you that ultimately made you say, I'm bigger than what I've dealt with and I can help?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, again, like just to talk about the language, right? So, as a recovery specialist, and I think in this field in general, there has been this huge shift around language. It's so important, right? But what we learned too is that, language is for the individual as well, right? So for me, right, personally, in my personal recovery, I might use a certain language that I wouldn't necessarily use even in this system, right? That because we want to continue to educate and tear down barriers, right, and reduce stigma um, for the people who are helping these individuals or supporting these individuals, the providers, but also for the individuals themselves, right? Um, I am a person in recovery, right? So like I'm not recovered either. Like it's an ongoing process. Like for me, there's not a finish line, right, for an individual in recovery, at least for me, right? And that's truly what I believe. That is an ongoing process of change, right? That's what recovery is. It's remembering who I am and becoming the person that I'm meant to be, right? And so I think about the question that you asked though, is just that. Like I am in recovery. When I go home, right? So right now, like I'm just going to use this metaphor, right? Like I'm wearing my St. Luke's gear, right? So like when I take this hat off or this shirt off, right, and I am in my personal life and I'm Ryan, in recovery, right? Like it's really important that I can decipher the difference between my own personal recovery and my recovery at work, right? And although it's gray, right, there is this path that there's a lot of similarities that I'm sharing and disclosing and practicing in work and in my personal recovery. It's really important that I know that when I leave work, I hang that shirt up, right? And I put on my personal shirt. And although I may have supported many individuals in a day or the community at large, educating the community on topics like we're talking about today, I do a lot of that kind of work too, in the community, going into schools, talking to youth about substance use prevention and recovery, right? It's very rewarding, right? Like it feels almost the same as what I'm doing in my personal life, right? But I have to check myself as an individual in recovery and remember that although it's rewarding what I'm doing for work, it is my job, right? So I need to continue to practice for my personal life and my personal recovery, what I would do, what I would tell any individual to do in their own personal recovery, right? Like it's almost double the work, if that makes sense. Like working in this field and being in recovery, it is almost like double the work because I've seen it happen. And that's why I share this, right? I at one point in my career, I supervised a team of individuals in recovery who shared their lived experience, right? That are certified. And I've just seen it being a part of these networks where I don't even want to necessarily call it burnout, but just sometimes individuals really get caught up in, well, I checked off all the boxes. I helped somebody today. I went to a support group with an individual that I was, supporting, but it was my job, right? So I'm doing all this stuff and they get caught up in that. And then for whatever reason, right, let's say the job comes to an end, then what? Right? You putting your eggs all in that one basket. It's really important not to. So I think that's kind of how I'm answering your question here, that like, that's how there may be these situations that, could be like quote unquote triggering, we'll say, right? Supporting individuals, especially in early recovery. But the important part is that I'm always in check with my own personal recovery. And then the other part of that is also being connected with, other professionals, right? Supervision, stuff like that is so important, right? And we have that, in the work that we do. So if say, I'm just going to use Amie as an example, if say Amie was my supervisor, right, and I do have some type of feeling, internally, mentally, physically, whatever, that is making me feel some type of way about a specific situation, I'm going to go to her, right, and say, listen, it's okay. It's not bad that I'm feeling this way. There's nothing wrong with me, right? It doesn't make me more or less that I'm feeling this type of way or having this reaction, but it's just so important. Like, that's part of like self-care and like boundaries and all that stuff in this field, is that I'm staying tapped into how I'm reacting to certain situations.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I would say it helps you stay balanced.
Absolutely.
Like balance in recovery, I think, is so important. And when you're doing the work of helping others in recovery, and you are in recovery yourself, Ryan just did a beautiful job of describing what that's like. It's easy to get complacent. Mm-hmm. And by that, I mean, exactly what he was saying with regards to kind of letting go of your own self-care, your own recovery care, because I'm doing it all day long. I don't need to do it at night for myself. So the beautiful thing about working for a large network is that, I may not supervise these two directly, but at any point of any day, they can get a hold of me and say, do you have 5 minutes? I just need to run something by you, and that's what makes the stigma go away in the network, but it's also what keeps all of us at the top of our game professionally and personally.
I mean, this is a conversation that you and I have kind of had a time or two, Amie, with some of the topics that we've discussed. We go back to our conversation about Uvalde. We go back to that, and just kind of, you talked about, your whole team kind of all having almost different reactions at different points, but everyone at some point just kind of having this moment of like, I gotta go, like I need to take the therapist hat off and actually talk to someone for myself to kind of feel a certain kind of way about everything that's going on. And to your point, that word balance seems like it's such an important word. Ryan, I will, one of my favorite things about doing this show is it's educational. And certainly I love that element of it. And I will certainly, going forward in this conversation, use in recovery as opposed to recovered. So thank you for sharing that knowledge with us today. I really do appreciate that. Erica, I kind of wanted to come back to a word that Ryan had alluded to earlier. He had talked about going out into schools and doing different things. The community element of roles for you and Ryan. Can you kind of listen? I know you talk about being in the emergency room and there in a moment. Can you kind of talk about what you yourself, what Ryan and that St. Luke's team has kind of done in the community about helping people find recovery, especially in your time that you've been a part of that?
Mm-hmm. So while I may work for St. Luke's now, I worked very heavily in the community prior to this in several different roles. So having that already established relationship with community partners made it really easy to come in. I've worked with specifically with Allentown Police Department, so they all know when they bring somebody in, they have a stack of my cards. So when they come in, they ask for me. Or if I'm not there, they can get a hold of me. So it's really important that even though we're not available 24 hours a day, because there's balance, I can't, I have to maintain my own recovery. They know how to get a hold of me when they're ready, because a lot of that, continuing on that, it may not happen that first time they see me. Recovery might not happen that first time. So when they're ready, they know where to go. And also, with the community engagement that Ryan is so amazing at, everybody else knows where to find us. I think that's the most important part, where it might not be an individual person. They know that St. Luke's is here to help them. No matter what, when, to get back to Amy's point of, we can go to her at any time. Anybody can walk into our emergency rooms, and if we're not there, they know how to get a hold of us. It's really important that not only can they bring patients in, but anybody from the community can come in and talk to me. So it's really important just to kind of keep our face out there. I continue to make those phone calls and go to community events, maintain those relationships, because it's really important. The same way I maintain relationships for my own personal recovery is the same thing that I do for my work recovery, for the people that are coming in, for the community. Because not only are we educating, I'm educating in the emergency rooms, we are changing that stigma in the community at large. So it's not a top down, it's a bottom up, and we just have to stay vigilant in that education.
So I loved what you said about how it sounds like at St. Luke's there's a door pretty wide open for anybody that wants to try to have a conversation at any point in time. Amie, I'll start with you on this question, and I'm very interested to see what Ryan and Erica have to say. If you feel like someone that is close to you is starting to get down a difficult path, I'm sure, look, we've talked about family conversations, significant other conversations a ton on this podcast. If you feel like, I guess the question is, where do you kind of begin? You had mentioned that, Erica, that the St. Luke's door is kind of wide open. Those conversations aren't always easy to have. So where do you begin? So I guess my question will be twofold. Amie, I'll kind of start with you. I'm interested on your perspective on maybe a significant person in someone's life who thinks that someone they love needs help. I will then kind of turn to Ryan and Erica with if someone is looking towards recovery, where do they begin? What's kind of where you would say this is your first step? So Amie, I will start with you in the question of, if you've got someone significant in your life, or someone comes to you and says, hey, I've got a brother, sister, whatever the case may be, that I think is heading down a difficult path. Yeah. What direction would you kind of send them in?
So I'm probably going to give an answer that the three of you weren't expecting, but what I'm going to say, as putting my co-occurring disorder professional hat on, is, have the conversation with your loved one. Tell them why you're worried. Encourage them to go to their primary care doc or go to the ER, wherever they feel comfortable, and then go take care of you. I think it's so important that instead of trying to fix people, we fix ourselves. I can give people the tools. A loved one, I can give my cousin, father, sister, grandmother, dog, the tools that they need, right? To say that here's a great place to call. You could go to your family doctor. Hey, I know Erica, I know Ryan. I can't do it for them. And that's where so many families get stuck in this pattern, in this cycle of frustration and fear. And it just kind of twists and turns and gets worse. So I would say, have your person know how important they are to you, and why you want them to get help, and what you need from them. Don't accuse them. It's not about, you did this and you did this. It's, what do you want? And then get help for yourself. Because if you get help for yourself and you grow your own support system and you learn how to not be codependent and you learn how to not enable, you're going to be helping to heal the system while your loved one is able to go get help when he or she is ready.
I see Ryan and Erica both smiling and nodding along. So, that is, I'll be honest, that's not exactly you're right. That answer kind of took me. So, Ryan, I'll turn to you. You've heard what Amie had to say there. Okay. So would you particularly agree? I saw you both smiling and nodding as she was making some points, but I would say, for me, from the outside perspective, that message was actually a little bit, as Amie said, kind of caught me off balance a little bit. So just kind of your thoughts on what Amie had to say.
Yeah. So I think she's very accurate there, right? Like, and it goes again, I'm going to use an analogy, right? Like when you board a plane, right? And they do the instructions, they tell you, hey, in case if emergency happens, you put your oxygen mask on first, right? Before you help other people even, right? Like on the plane. It's so important that whoever you are, and if we're talking about no wrong door here, right? There's no wrong door to recovery. We want to make that very apparent, right? Like even if, say, I'm the door, right, and or Erica's the door, the hospital, or Amie, in her role or in the community or whatever, right? Like if I can't provide the appropriate resource at that time, even for St. Luke's, let's say, for whatever reason, right? It's just, things happen, right? Day to day. Hey, I don't, I'll refer somebody somewhere else. I mean, here you go. Let me just throw spaghetti on the wall of resources. I'll help you navigate it. Like that's my job. Like we just want to help people. No wrong door, no wrong pathway, right? But back to that analogy of, we need to help ourselves before we can help others, right? Or support others. We need to continue to care for ourselves and make sure that that we are doing, what we can do for ourselves so that we're able to show up for others and we're equipped to show up for others, right? And I just want to speak to this real quick too, that as a certified recovery specialist specifically, we were talking about this a little bit and you had asked me even like, hey, why did you, get into this field or, into recovery specialist type work? And I'm just going to call it what it is, right? Because a big part of even what you learn in the training as a certified recovery specialist, and I think the recovery community at large, you learn about 12-step fellowships, right? And I think a lot of times people, when they think of recovery, still, think of that, right? A 12-step fellowship, right? And, so there's thousands and thousands and thousands, countless people out there that are in recovery long term. They've been in recovery for a really long time and they've found a new way of life, right? And their families have been impacted by it in a positive way. And, just as much as the negative, there's so much positive, right? But you don't hear about it, right? Because a lot of 12-step fellowships, right? There's this principle of anonymity, right? And being anonymous and the concept of that. And so it's not those individuals' jobs to share their lived experience, right? And connect with people and show them that there's no wrong door and show them that there's all these resources because they might not even know them, right? They're individuals who might be, facilitating a podcast for their full-time job or working at a restaurant or, have their own company or whatever, right? They go to these places for their own personal recovery, right? But the beautiful thing about being a certified recovery specialist is that component of being a person in recovery, like we were talking about personally, but then having this skill set and this professionalism and all these resources, right? And knowing the system to help individuals navigate that, right? So I don't want to say the word simulate, but it's almost like a certified recovery specialist is simulating that relationship that so many individuals, thousands of individuals are getting in the community at large, through this one door, right? A 12-step fellowship, we'll say. But a certified recovery specialist is able to offer that connection through all these other doors. You get what I'm saying?
Sure.
And continue to open these doors for individuals and say, hey, let me connect with you. Let me give you this experience. I want to walk with you. I want to show you how these relationships, like Erica was talking about, how important relationships are for her in her own personal recovery. Let me help to foster these relationships and show you different pathways and connect you with these different things. Because not everybody who is entering through a specific door is going to say like, I want to do that. Or they might even say, well, I had a bad experience with that. And it's like,
Sure.
okay, well, there's 100 more doors that we can walk through, right? To engage you around recovery. So I know that was long-winded, but I wanted to put that out there.
No, that was absolutely very well said. I think to come back to you and Amie on that, it's the old, you can't fill others' cups with an empty cup yourself. So
Yeah.
certainly that balance is so important. Erica, I guess to come back to you with the second part of that initial question then. So Ryan very much said there's not one door you go through. There's a bunch of different doors, different people, different backgrounds that you can take what is in essence a first step in saying, I'm looking towards a road of recovery. That first conversation, what if someone comes to you and says, I'm looking towards recovery? What is there kind of one particular road you try to send people to? Again, everybody's background, as Ryan just said, everybody's background's different. What might work for you somebody else might work for Ryan, somebody else might work with Amie. Just that first initial conversation, someone comes in and says, I need help. Where do you as a specialist go from there?
I think it's really important to, what does help mean to you? Like really basic of what does recovery look like to you? Because they might have this expectation of a 12-step fellowship and it failed for them before, or having that, it's really hard to have a scripted conversation. It's, because everybody is different.
Sure.
So what does it mean to you? Like what, and it usually runs into, well, I've lost my kids, I've lost my wife, I've lost my family, I've lost all of these things. How's that relationship with yourself? Like, I don't want to be a therapist in the emergency room, but have you lost yourself? How can we find you? How can we help you? Because all of those things, let's not worry about those right now. Like, I understand how important they are to you. But if you're not here for you, then you're not going to help them. Like, it's really important to have that really, general conversation of like, what does this mean to you? When we talked about earlier about a family member or a friend, I have the experience of getting over involved as a recovery specialist, getting over involved with somebody that I knew in recovery, getting over involved in what that meant to her. And at the end, unfortunately, she didn't make it. She overdosed and she passed. But I lost myself. I lost what I'm actually supposed to be doing here and that professionalism. And, we have that as a family member because we have the experience of friends and family in, that still suffer from something. We think that we can love them and it'll be enough. But sometimes loving them is causing them more harm and spiraling that toxic relationship to the point where we're not allowing them to reach that bottom. We're not allowing them to make their own decisions. When we talk about autonomy, it's also giving them that choice, right? So when I think about my own recovery and then somebody else's recovery, it's this is what my recovery means to me. What does that mean to you? Because here's my boundary. Where do I end and where do you start? Yeah. So it's really important that they also understand the boundary because they might not have any. So, when we're talking about simulating a relationship, I might be the first healthy relationship or healthy conversation that they've had.
Sure. First of all, I want to give credit to all three of you because a word that's come up in this podcast a couple of times today has been culture. And I can tell that St. Luke's team sitting across from me there works very well together, is very understanding of one another. I think one of the common themes we've had in doing a number of different episodes and a number of different topics in this podcast has been the idea of empathy and sympathy, and kind of where you can start to maybe help someone, whether that's a family member, whether that's a friend, whoever that may be. And I just think you all have that in abundance, and it's a very special thing. And I think you all use it in a different way. Um, and I just want to give credit to you all in the culture of St. Luke's for facilitating a place that kind of under any circumstance sounds like it would be a good place to start for anyone in whatever situation they're feeling. Okay, so Amie, I couldn't help but notice that you've done quite a bit of smiling and nodding throughout this podcast episode. I just want to give you kind of the chance to wrap things up for us. Obviously, it's very clear I've come away from this conversation more knowledgeable. Thank you. I love the idea of trying to understand, and empathy and sympathy, whether you've experienced it yourself or you haven't, and you just want to be supportive. So I think I've said my piece for the day. Amie, I would love for you to maybe wrap this one up with our guests today, Ryan and Erica, and then I'll put the bow on the end. So thank you.
Got it. So I want to thank you, Erica and Ryan, for joining me today for our podcast. It was a pleasure to have you both. I'm honored to be sitting here with you and working with you. I think for me, in Recovery Month and in celebrating Recovery Month, I think the message that the three of us want to send is that, this is good. Recovery is good. Getting clean, getting sober, staying clean and sober is a lifelong job. It doesn't end after you have a year clean. It doesn't end after you have 10 years clean. It is a lifetime commitment. Substance use disorder is a family disease. It takes a village. All of those cliche things are so true. And here at St. Luke's, we're your village. We're where you're going to start. And we've got people that know what to do to help you get to the right place. It's a matter of taking a look at inside yourself and saying, okay, where's my motivation? Am I ready to quit? Am I ready to get clean? Am I thinking about it? And I'm not quite ready to act on it, but I'm starting to think about it yet. Still okay to come talk to us, because when you're in that kind of, I'm contemplating things, we know what to do when you're in that phase to help move you to maybe action. So there's no wrong door, there's no wrong time. And, there's lots of caring people. And in this Recovery Month of September, we just want to say, love yourself enough to get the help.
Well, if you want to get in touch with any of these wonderful folks at St. Luke's, you can visit sluhn.org, or it sounds like just walk in a door. Undoubtedly, there's one open someplace there. It is the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It's brought to you by St. Luke's University Health Network. For Amie Allanson-Dundon, Ryan Schweiger, and Erica Panella, I thank you all so much for a great conversation today. You can find the Just Start the Conversation podcast on Google, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Like, subscribe, review, share, all that good stuff you hear people who have podcasts do. And thank you so much for checking out the Just Start the Conversation podcast.